Hey everyone, welcome to Princess of Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with my Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom review. I almost said Breath of the Wild. This is going to be my review for the newer at this point game of the Legend of Zelda series, and I'm going to be pretty comprehensive here. I have a list of topics to talk about. We're going to go through that list, and I'm gonna try to keep it as concise as possible, but we're probably going to talk on and on, knowing me. And I'm just going to give my thoughts on the game because I have finished it now. I've done everything I really planned to do in terms of side quests and everything, in terms of exploration, and in terms of the main story. I have completed all of that. So, yeah, we're going to just go through this and hopefully not make it 2 hours long. But before we begin, I will just say real quick, um, this video will just be me talking. It's not going to include um, it's not going to include any clips or whatnot. Just it's going to be a vlog style review, I guess you could say. Um, and I will be talking for a little bit just on my past with these games and everything, but we will be going into spoilers later. I'll give you a bigger spoiler warning when we get to that. Okay, so I grew up with The Legend of Zelda. This is a series that I've been playing pretty much since I could play video games. And I played video games all my life. See, when I was growing up, I was introduced to video games through my uncle because he had an NES. Um, and I was introduced through that, and I got to play like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games throughout the years, and Mario games, and of course, Legend of Zelda games. And of course, I started right away with the first one. Even though that came out before I was born, it's where I started because it's what my uncle had. And so I was playing through those and everything, and I had a lot of fun with them. I enjoyed the games and just continued to play. As I grew up, the series started to change. We eventually went into 3D, played through Ocarina, Majora's Mask, and all that. And I was just a fan. And then, after I had graduated high school, um, I ended up buying a Wii for myself, along with the newly released Skyward Sword. And with the motion controls that a lot of people complain about, I never had an issue with. Um, I had to get one of those little dongles that you attach to the end of the controller. Um, and it was a completely new experience for a Legend of Zelda game for me. It was very different from previous entries, and I loved it. It became, as of that time, my favorite Legend of Zelda game. I played through it a couple times, loved the story, loved the gameplay, loved the aesthetic of it. Because prior to that, we had the likes of Twilight Princess, which I did not like the aesthetic of at all. I actually thought it was trying to be way too edgy, way too dark, and just the style of it was ugly. It looked ugly. And it didn't feel like a Legend of Zelda game to me. And I never even got through it all because I didn't like it. I've seen pretty much all of it through other people's Let's Plays and stuff, or just my siblings' playthroughs, but I never played all of it myself. After Skyward Sword, though, it's like I played various games here and there, like the smaller games, and I kept up with a lot, but I didn't really play a lot myself after that. When Breath of the Wild came out, I didn't have a Switch at the time or a Wii U. So I ended up having to watch Let's Plays on it. And I watched quite a bit of Let's Plays, and I've seen the entirety of the game. But I never played it myself, and it sucks. I always wanted to, but I never did. I mean, I maybe played like maybe 10, 15 minutes of it at a school, but that's it. Um, but yeah, that's all I got to play of that before. Then, when Tears of the Kingdom was announced and it was starting to come out this year, I decided a couple months before release that I was going to borrow my sister's copy of Breath of the Wild, and I was going to play it myself. Even though I knew the game already, I was actually going to play it myself because I wanted to get a hang of the controls. Because Tears of the Kingdom would be pretty much the same controls. So I wanted to get the hang of the controls and just prepare myself. So I played through it, and I played about 50 hours. That included beating the main story and doing certain side quests and stuff that I wanted to do. It wasn't that exciting because admittedly I had played it, or I had seen it all before. But because of that, I was also able to get through it fairly easily. And again, it was mostly just for getting used to the controls anyway. So I wasn't like upset or anything. So yeah, Breath of the Wild, let's talk about that briefly. So when Breath of the Wild first came out, it was a big change for the series. Like, there had sort of been open world before, like with the first Zelda game, but it wasn't like this. Partially due to the graphics. Oh, excuse me. But this was a big breakthrough, especially since, Legend of Zelda went 3D. Having an open world just allowed it to breathe a lot better and allowed it to have a bigger scale. And so when I first started checking it out, I was just hoping that it would contain the same feeling as Legend of Zelda. That it would come across as one of this franchise and give the same kind of general vibes and good time. That was my biggest hope. And I watched the I watched the Let's Plays to it. And yeah, it very much did. I enjoyed not only the aesthetic of it, but I also loved the characters, the story, the overall feeling of it. Like, it felt like a Legend of Zelda game. And the fact that it reconverged the timelines is really fascinating as well. Because after Ocarina, we had that big timeline split. And the fact that this reconverges the timelines way, 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 way into the future is really fascinating. So I was really enjoying it. And again, I'd seen multiple Let's Plays, so I got very used to this style. And by the time I had seen pretty much everything of it, it had definitely become my favorite Legend of Zelda game. And I hadn't even been playing it. But it was my favorite due to the story, the characters, the aesthetic, the world, all of that made it my favorite, rather than, gameplay. Once I played it, though, once I did play it, again, a couple months leading up to Tears of the Kingdom's release, I didn't really change my mind on that. In fact, it was more solidified for me through the gameplay. It just was that good of a game. Some people complain about it not having the same puzzles and dungeons as previous games, that it wasn't as focused on that, but I never had an issue with that. Different Zelda games do different things, have different mechanics, different styles, different gameplay, and that's fine. And this game just didn't have as many puzzles and dungeons, and that's fine. That's not an issue. And in the end, it didn't stop the game from becoming my favorite. But Tears of the Kingdom was promising to be even better, and had been promising pre-launch to bring in a lot of new stuff and old stuff that had been left out in Breath of the Wild. So, this is the part where the spoiler warning is, because this is where we're going to really start talking about spoilers. There's going to be some spoilers for before the release, pre-release for Tears of the Kingdom, some stuff that was talked about there. But we're also going to be talking a lot about spoilers of the game, of the full game that is released currently. So, just letting you know that this is your spoiler warning. We are going to be talking about big stuff, big story stuff, big gameplay stuff, mechanics, characters, all that fun stuff. So just letting you know ahead of time. But that being said, we will get into those spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. Okay, so Tears of the Kingdom had been announced years before its release, and we were all readily waiting for it. We started getting more trailers leading up to it, and it started promising a lot of interesting things. The return of Ganondorf, Sky Islands, and some really interesting mechanics that would change the way that you played. These trailers started to show off little bits of them, but not really go too in depth. And as they continued, we got more and more. So there was a lot of hype going into this. There was a lot that was being built up. And when the big trailer dropped, the big pre-release trailer that finally revealed Ganondorf, it was monumental. The feedback from the community and just everywhere online was huge. It was exceptional. This game was getting so much more hype than Breath of the Wild ever did. And that's saying something. And so I was going into this expecting it to be better than Breath of the Wild, because that's what they were telling us it was going to be. We go from having Calamity Ganon in Breath of the Wild to the Demon King himself, Ganondorf. We get all these new mechanics. We get these Sky Islands. We get all this stuff that they're showing off. I'm expecting it to be better. But I'm also tempering my expectations a bit, because I don't want to assume it's going to be better. I don't want to force that, because I don't want to be disappointed if it's not. So I chose to go in thinking I'm hoping it's going to be better, but if it's not, it's still going to be pretty damn good. It's not going to be worse than Breath of the Wild. I had no doubts in my mind about that. So, that being said, the game did finally release. I got it on pre-order right on release night, and yeah, it came with a pre-order bonus from GameStop, a plaque featuring the Zonai hand. I don't have that with me at the moment, but yeah. And I was excited. I was ready. So when I booted up the game, it, you could say, surprised me. Because the game kicks off with a cutscene. And you get to move around during this and all, but it's mostly this opening cutscene with a little bit of movement. That's pretty much it. It starts off with Link and Zelda heading through the underground. You are underneath the castle of Hyrule. And you are just exploring, trying to figure out where this weird red mist is coming from. The mist is being referred to as gloom, and you're trying to find out its origin. As you explore, you start to find Zonai Runes, the ruins of an ancient civilization long gone. Zelda has done studies and leads you through what this all means. You find some murals with some of them blocked off. You find a lot waiting for you. But you eventually get to a chamber that features a mummified Ganondorf, imprisoned by a severed hand and sealed away. But the instant you step in, the seal breaks and Ganondorf revives. So Ganondorf in this game is voiced by Matt Mercer, because starting in Breath of the Wild, we started getting like actual voicing, even if it's not like all the time. There's enough to justify it. And honestly, I wouldn't want it all the time anyway. I think it works better this way for a game like Zelda. But yeah, Matt Mercer, who is a lifelong Zelda fan and who has always wanted to voice Ganondorf, finally gets to. A dream role for him, and I love that kind of shit. So he gets to voice Ganondorf, and yeah, he does a phenomenal job. Like, right from the start, we hear like his emaciated, dried up voice. It's perfect. He's, despite sounding, like a mummy, basically, he's terrifying. He is intense. And it goes partially down due to the writing of the dialogue, the animation of the cutscene and everything, but also the voice acting. Matt Mercer makes him utterly terrifying. But yeah, so Ganondorf awakens and basically taunts Link and Zelda before briefly attacking. He attacks them briefly. That's how Link loses all the hearts after Breath of the Wild, all the stamina that you have to gain again. Just a way to make that make sense. The Master Sword is also broken during this exchange. But instead of attacking again, Ganondorf decides to basically attack Hyrule itself by raising the castle into the sky using his powers. And afterwards, just kind of destroying everything else. He causes a lot of chaos throughout the land, and that kind of leads into a lot of what your main story is going to be. But while everything's raising up, the ground is breaking and everything below you, Zelda falls. You try to catch her, but she ends up disappearing. You're saved by the disembodied hand, and it cuts to the beginning of the actual gameplay and all after that. Because, again, all you really did before this were, like, hit a few keys briefly and walk. That's pretty much everything. But after that, you end up waking up in a mysterious place. A voice calls out to you, and you have to start to explore. You get to explore, you find the decayed Master Sword, and you find out that you are on a sky island. You explore the sky island, you meet some robots called the Steward Constructs, as well as some more aggressive ones called Soldier Constructs. And you start to explore this land, gather materials, and make your way to the Temple of Time, where Zelda is said to be. Once you end up getting there, though, you aren't allowed in, and end up meeting the spirit of someone named Rauru, a goat-like person who is very clearly, right off the bat, a Zonai. You meet Rauru, and you are basically led to doing some shrines on the island. After you complete all of them, including a secret one at the end that you only get to even learn about after going into the Temple of Time, you unlock the full scope of the Temple of Time, you get a new heart, and you find out what happened to Zelda. As you go on into the very back of the Temple of Time to this like lookout platform, you end up sending the Master Sword back in time. And it arrives in front of Zelda, which makes it very clear that Zelda, when she disappeared while falling, had been sent back in time. So that's interesting. Right off the bat. Time travel has been a thing in Legend of Zelda for a long time. It's nothing new. But the way it's done here is very different, because usually you're the one playing as Link traveling through time. Usually it's not just the other characters. So that's a very interesting twist on it. The fact that Link's not the one traveling through time this time, but Zelda. So at this point, without the Master Sword and without truly a clue of where Zelda is, well, for Link, your goal is to now head down to the Kingdom of Hyrule. You have to dive off of the platform, which is, again, very high up in the sky, and land on the surface, landing in a lake or pond to break your fall. Because unlike in real life, no matter what height you fall from, if you land in water, you're Gucci. Like, it's just, you will survive. That is not how reality works. That is not how physics work in reality. If you're high enough and you hit water, it is basically a brick wall. You will die hard. But video game logic, it's not a big deal. This world has magic, so hey. That's pretty much your intro portion. While Breath of the Wild had the Great Plateau, this one has the Great Sky Island. It introduces you to a lot of the concepts, and while you're there, you get these Zonai Runes that help you do different things, and I'll talk more about those later. But once you reach Hyrule, you have free roam on the surface. You can basically do whatever you want, of course, but there is a main story that is preferable to go to right away. But you'll notice as you travel that the Kingdom of Hyrule is different. It's mostly the same in terms of locations and whatnot and visuals, but there's a lot that's different about it too. And what I mean by that is because of the it's called the upheaval, as what they're calling it, with this castle rising up and everything. It's actually affected a lot more than that within the kingdom. Chasms have appeared, these giant chasm holes in the ground. Those have appeared all over Hyrule. The landscape has changed. Rocks and stuff have fallen out of the sky. Entire ruins have fallen out of the sky. A lot is different. So exploration is just as rewarding as in Breath of the Wild, because even though it's basically the same map, there's a lot that's new to it. There's a lot of changes and updates. And there's just so much exciting stuff to find now. There was before, but especially now with the big changes. So my priorities were to follow the main story until I got a few things at least. Because there are definitely going to be a few tools in this that I needed, such as the paraglider. And I wanted to make sure I got these tools before I continued on, because they were going to be invaluable. I didn't want to go and explore and everything without the paraglider, because I felt like that could be dangerous. It could be a mistake. So I decided to follow the main story, and that led me to the main hub area of Lookout Landing, a basically pop-up community right outside of Hyrule Castle, right outside of that area. And it is led by Dr. Purah, who was from the first game and has now perfected her aging manipulation technique, which is not like a power or anything. It's science. She's a scientist, but she's perfected it because in the last game she messed it up and accidentally aged herself back into a little child, even though she's 120 years old. She finally perfected it though and managed to get herself back to 20 years old. So she's still obviously a lot younger than she in reality is. But she decided to go with a younger self because that's what her goal was in the first place. So you meet her, you meet her associate Robbie, who was in the previous game, as well as a new scientist, a new young scientist named Joshua. And this is where things start to get interesting because you start to meet characters who weren't in the first game, and there start to be some questions of like, did you just never come across them in the game? Like, was that never just part of the story for Breath of the Wild, or were they born between the events of the game? Because Joshua is, I think, pretty clearly a young teenager. I would say she's 12 or 13. Preteen to young teenager. I do not see her being younger than that, but I also cannot see her being older than 13. She's still pretty young, and also the Sheikah live for a long time, so they look younger a little longer, to be fair, but still. I would say she's 12 to 13, which very much to me implies that she was alive before the events of this game, that she was alive in Breath of the Wild's time period, but we just never came across her. I don't know like where she was supposed to be, whether Kakariko or Hateno or somewhere else. But yeah, she's involved now, and I'll get to the entire timeline stuff in the future here. So, yeah, my priorities centered around just going through that. I had to go to Hyrule Castle to meet up with Captain Haas, and eventually I got the paraglider, and I unlocked the first of the towers. The towers in this game I think there's a lot more of them, and instead of climbing to the top, you just launch yourself from the bottom. You launch yourself up into the sky, and this is how you get back into the sky to explore Sky Islands and stuff. So you launch yourself, you record the landscape, fill in your map on the Purah pad, which replaces last game's Sheikah slate. And yeah, you get your map and you get to explore the sky if you want, or just go straight back down to the ground. This is also a great way to travel. If you want to travel long distances, this is a great way to do it. So I got that. I got some upgrades to my Purah pad from Robbie, and I explored the depths briefly to do so, because you have to go into the depths for the first time after getting the paraglider to help Robbie get to get a picture for Joshua. That gives you the camera, and if you continue to follow through with Robbie, you'll end up getting some more stuff, including the bestiary. I can't remember what it's called. The bestiary, basically. And you even get the ability to put down those little teleport pad. I can't remember what anything's called, you know? The little teleport pad. You get like 3 of them. They were in the DLC in Breath of the Wild, which I didn't play, by the way. But you get 3 of those, so you get those from Robbie. You also get the ability to track your progress from him. Again, something else that was from the DLC. You could track your progress along the map that way and see exactly where you've been and what you've done throughout the course of the game. Or at least I think it goes for the past 200 hours, actually. So it's like, that would be the entire game for me. Maybe it's not 200, I don't know. I don't use it much, so. But yeah, they're all useful stuff. I definitely used the temporary teleport spots though. Well, I mean, I say temporary, but they stay up until you take them off and put them somewhere else. But yeah, I use those. But yeah, so I wanted to get all that stuff. Then I went to explore. Now, in Lookout Landing, they kind of led me into a direction. So I started going into the direction of the Rito first. Because it talks about the 4 regions: the Rito, the Gorons, the Zora, and the Gerudo. And so you get this main quest to head to each of the 4 regions and kind of see what's going on with them. There's been news and reports from all of them that basically shit's going down after the upheaval, and per on them kind of lead you to go to the Rito first. They bring up a lot about them and talk about that there's shit going on. Plus, you learn about a newspaper that has opened up there, and so it's like it's definitely leading you in that direction. But there's also another quest line that opens up if you find Impa. As you're exploring, if you find Kato, one of the Sheikah guards for Impa in Breath of the Wild, he gives you this news that Impa's out and about doing some research, and he wants you to find her. And if you find her nearby a stable, you can start another quest line, another main quest line called the Dragon's Tears. This is an extremely important quest line that you want to get as early as possible. Because the Dragon's Tears quest line gives you the memories in this game. You basically have to explore the geoglyphs, these large geographical pictures in the grass and everything, the grass, the rocks, all of that of the kingdom, and find these like little pool spots, these little like pond spots that are the tears, the dragon's tears. And by finding those, you get the memories. There is an order to do them, and I would definitely suggest watching them in order, because seeing them out of order, it like even just like in the previous game, it's gonna confuse the shit out of you. Seeing them in order just makes so much more sense. And you can find the order pretty easily. If you actually follow the quest line and follow Impa to the Lost Temple, I believe it's called, it'll actually show the order in the final room there. No, the Forgotten Temple. But yeah, it shows the order, so just follow that. But yeah, so that's another big quest line that you have to go through within this game. During exploration, you also want to check out the main villages. There are 4 main villages that you definitely want to check out during the game. Kakariko is the main village of the Sheikah, where Impa was previously stationed. You go there and find out that her granddaughter, Paya, has become the new chief of the Sheikah. Impa has retired and left it to Paya. Paya is nervous about her new responsibilities and duties, but is choosing to take full charge and be the leader that her grandmother wants her to be, even if she doesn't feel she's entirely ready for that yet. She's working with an archaeologist from Lurelin village named Toro, as well as another scientist named Calip, who you met in Breath of the Wild, in order to research these ring-shaped ruins that have fallen atop Kakariko village. So you go there, and a lot of the same characters are there. You'll see some of the kids who have grown up a lot more. You'll see the same people at the shops and whatnot. There's some changes, of course, because of the ring ruins falling, but most of it's pretty familiar, and you'll recognize things pretty easily. There's some storylines that you'll be introduced to there as well that are really fun to do. Um, there's some shopping you can do there, but a lot of that is also kind of set up for the future. Hateno Village, meanwhile, has become a fashion hub. You can get involved with a mayoral election there, in which there is only one valid candidate, and it's fucking not Cece. Fuck Cece. I'm not going to get into all of that here, but I hate that bitch. um, but there's a lot that you can do here, and in the farm just outside of it, you can get cheese, which is new. And you can use cheese with another new product called Hylian tomatoes, as well as some wheat to create pizza. You can make pizza in this game, and it's hilarious. And it's also really good. Like, it's actually a really good food item to make too. Um, but yeah, it's just hilarious that you can do that. um, and there's a couple other things like that too that are just really funny that you can make, like rice balls and whatnot. But in Hateno, there's different things to do. You can visit the dye shop. You can visit all the other shops. Plenty of stuff, just like in the first game. Lurelin Village you can visit, but you have to save when you do. And I don't mean save your game, I mean you have to save the village, because Lurelin Village has been taken over by pirates. The pirates, who are bokoblins and whatnot, Lizalfos and all, have taken over the village, run pretty much all of the villagers out, and are just wreaking havoc. So you have to take care of them before you can even do anything. But when you arrive, you meet the mayor, who is trying to figure out what to do, alongside an old face from Breath of the Wild, Bolson, of the former Bolson Construction. Bolson is just, he's fabulous. He's awesome. He's a great character. He's just so awesome. I just love him. But you meet up with him and the mayor to find out everything that happened, and then you have to go in and clear it out. Once you clear it out, you help build it back up with Bolson, and everything is hunky-dory. You get to explore Lurelin Village again. You get a bunch of stuff for free, including food. There's an inn there you can sleep at for free. Everyone is thankful to you, and it's just a nice little fishing village. It's a wonderful time. And the final of the main villages is, of course, Tarrey Town. Tarrey Town, if you remember in Breath of the Wild, is a town that you actually get to help build. Working with Hudson of Bolson Construction, you got to create this town from scratch. You help him find different villagers who can help him, basically accomplish different goals when creating the town, and you get him materials as well. And once you're finished with the town, you're rewarded with not only some great stuff, but a wedding. Hudson ends up falling in love with a Gerudo that you found named Ronson. And yes, all the people that you find in Breath of the Wild have son at the end of the name. It's the Bolson Construction policy. So Ronson and Hudson end up getting married, and you actually get to be part of the wedding. And it's a really beautiful moment that feels like you really accomplished something. And you helped two people find love. You helped this community literally get off the ground. It's one of the most satisfying quest lines in Breath of the Wild. So going back to it here, you get to see how Tarrey Town has grown since then. And not only Tarrey Town, but the people within it and their families. Because you get to meet Madison, the young daughter of Hudson and Ronson, who was not alive yet in Breath of the Wild. And Madison is who I would say is the strongest defining evidence for the amount of time between these two games in terms of in lore. Because there's all these questions about how long is it between the events of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Madison is the biggest damning evidence, because a lot of the other characters, it's hard to tell like exactly how many years they've aged because they were in the previous game, such as Katla and Coco from Kakariko Village. It's like you can't really tell how much they've aged. It's really hard to figure that out. But again, in Breath of the Wild, you got Hudson and Ronson together, and they had not had a kid yet. Madison is new, which means she had to be born between the events of the two games. Madison is also very clearly at least 6 years old. I would say anywhere between 6 and 8. I don't think she's necessarily as old as 10, but she could be. But she's definitely not younger than 6. Like, you can tell by the way she speaks, by her mannerisms and everything. She comes across as between 6 and 8. Maybe upwards of 10, but that's kind of questionable. So it's been at least 6 years since Breath of the Wild. And honestly, I just believe that. It just makes the most sense based on where the kingdom is at and where everything has gone to. And it starts to make sense with other characters that you start to see who have aged and stuff. It works out. It's like a perfect amount of time to say 6 years, but up to 8 works as well. So Madison is kind of proof of that. But in Tarrytown, you get to do a bunch of things for the people there, and especially for Hudson. Because Madison, as a Gerudo, as part of their culture, has to go back to Gerudo Town to live until she's an adult, at which point she leaves Gerudo Town to search for a husband. Or I guess a partner in general. It only talks about husbands in the game, but let's be honest. Just like with like the Amazons in Themyscira in DC Comics, there is no fucking way that all of the Gerudo are straight. You know a shit ton of them are gay. You know that for sure. They're 100% gay Gerudo. But yeah. So Madison is getting ready to head back to Gerudo Town. She's excited for it. But her father, Hudson, is scared. He doesn't want to lose his little girl. He's not allowed in Gerudo Town because he's a guy. And he's just going to miss her so much because he loves her. He adores her. And so you have to help them basically get ready for this. And it's one of the cutest fucking storylines ever. Like, it's like they took Tarrytown, which was already super amazing and precious, and just, like, shot it up through the roof. It's just amazing. It's like, I adore everything to do with the Tarrytown storyline in both games. But other than the villages, there's other places to explore as well, because under the surface of Hyrule, there's also the depths. The depths are a large underground area that has the same amount of space as the surface. So basically a third map, because you have the sky, which has a bunch of random little sky islands and stuff. You have the surface, which is the main map from the previous game, with obviously some changes and all. And now you have a third map, which is the size of the surface in the underground. And the depths are scary. They're dark, which means you have to light them up with bright bloom seeds, or find the various light roots that light them up, as well as fill in the map of the depths for you. But there's monsters to deal with down there that give you gloom damage. And if you get gloom damage in the depths, it doesn't heal. You have to either use items to heal it, like food or elixirs that you create that can heal gloom damage, or you have to go to the surface to heal it. Because when you're gloom damaged, your maximum hearts are basically temporarily decreased. So if you have 5 hearts total and get 2 gloom damage, you have 3 hearts. You can't heal past 3 hearts unless you remove the gloom damage first. It's a wild mechanic. But exploring the depths is a really fun thing to do throughout the game, and trying to find all the light roots and fill it out is pretty satisfying. You also get some Zonai Runes at the beginning of the game, for the most part, during the Great Sky Island part, the tutorial. That's what I was thinking of. You get Ultra Hand, which is basically like Magnesis from the previous game, except it works on more than just metal. And you can also turn stuff with it and attach things to other things. It's very useful. You get Fuse, in which you can fuse items and whatnot to your weapons and shields. You get the best ability, Ascend, which allows you to basically swim through solid material by ascending upward through it. It's super useful, and fun fact, it was literally a debug tool used by the developers that they just decided, this is cool, we're just going to put it in the game. It was actually a developer tool that they just decided to make an in-game mechanic, and that's hilarious. But it's so useful. It's the most practical rune you get. But you also get the rune that allows you to reverse time, basically. But not for everything, only for a certain object. You can reverse the time of, like, gears moving. You can reverse the time of a boulder flying at you to fly right back at the enemy or whatnot. Stuff like that. And you get, later on, another rune in the depths called Auto Build. Auto Build allows you to save and quickly, auto build anything that you build using the Ultra Hand ability, whether it be some kind of vehicle or something else like that. It's really useful, and if you don't have all the parts you need right by you, you can use Zonite, this material that you gather throughout the game, to help fuel that as well, which is super useful. But if you do use Zonite, it will disappear if you break the whatever you build with it. It will disappear because, unfortunately, it's a temporary thing if you use Zonite. But, I mean, it's a quick fix if you don't have the material, so it's fair. So the Zonai Runes are all really useful in various ways. Like I said, though, the most practical and everything, in my opinion, is easily Ascend. It is exceptionally useful for so many reasons, getting through so much of the game. If I didn't have Ascend, the game would have been exceptionally more difficult. And some people might like that, but I just feel it would have been needlessly difficult. Ascend is so useful in the game. It is so actively useful. And I just couldn't imagine playing the game without it. But the others are still good too. The one I use the least is the time reverse one. It's just like, I use it basically for puzzles that require it, and that's about it. Because it's just like, I don't feel the need to use it in battle against enemies and stuff. I've done it like maybe 2 or 3 times in the entire 130 hours I played this game. So it's like, yeah, it's not really my thing. But let's actually talk about the 4 regions themselves now. So I went to Rito first, because as I said, everything was leading to that. And in the Rito region, you get to meet a grown-up Tulin. Tulin is the son of Teba and Saki. Teba was the next generation champion that you met in Breath of the Wild. The white Rito, who is a lot nicer than Rivali ever was. But you meet their now older son, Tulin, who is a prodigy. He's extremely talented. He has a special ability that no one else seems to have, and is basically in line to become an amazing Rito warrior if only he wasn't, a kid. Because he's kind of childish and immature and doesn't really take things as seriously as he should because he's a kid. But you end up helping him get his bow back, and you eventually travel with him to help find the cause of a blizzard that is ravaging the Rito, the entire area around there as well. And you find the source of the blizzard is the Stormwind Ark, a mysterious flying ship from a long, long time ago that is now only viewed as a fairy tale. But you end up finding it and reaching it and finding out that it's the first fucking temple. Well, if you go to the Rito first. It is the Wind Temple. And when I first descended down to the ship, because you have to fly up above it because it's surrounded by a giant storm. When I first descended down to it and the big thing that came up that said the Wind Temple, I cried. I'm not kidding you. I actually lost it. Because it's like, Breath of the Wild didn't have temples like this. And just the reveal of that, just the big reveal, as well as just the epicness of the flying ship in the first place, and the visuals, everything about that, the floodgates opened. I cried because I was just so excited. It wasn't sad tears, it was happy tears. It was excited tears. I was hyped. And yeah, I couldn't wait to explore. And I explored the temple with Tulin, and oh my god, it was so fun. It was so actively fun exploring the temple. I figured it out. A couple things about it took me a while to figure out. But I did, and we got the first boss, Colgera. Again, first boss based on how I went along the path. So Colgera is a giant centipede-like ice monster, basically. There are two main ways to defeat it. You can attack its weak points from underneath, or you can dive through its weak points from above. And the way that you're supposed to do it is from above. But I guess doing it from below is fine too. I did it from above because that just felt the most obvious, because the diving mechanic is a big mechanic in the game. And on top of that, when you're above him, he starts to launch the spikes off of the top of the weak points that reveal the weak points. It's just obvious you're supposed to dive through them. And so I did so, and I beat him. I beat Colgera, and yeah. After that, Tulin is contacted by the Sage of Winds. So yeah, sages are back. The Sage of Winds of the past contacts Tulin, spiritual mumbo jumbo and all, and you're there too, of course, and tells Tulin that all those years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago or whatever, the Demon King attacked King Rauru. You find out Rauru is the king, which you also find out through the Dragon's Tears memories. But King Rauru, you find out, fought Ganondorf and had to sacrifice himself to seal him away. Zelda, who was sent to the past, as we know, convinces the sage to lend help to Link in the future. So now the Sage of Winds transfers his power to Tulin, who becomes the new sage and gains the ability to create an avatar, which he then gives to you. So you have the ability to bring out an avatar of Tulin, which allows you to like shoot yourself further through the air at any point in the game while you're using your paraglider. It's a super useful ability that I used constantly after getting it. It's probably the most useful sage ability you get in the game, I would say. But I'll talk more about the sages in a bit. So Tulin becomes the new Sage of Wind and pledges himself to fight alongside you. You go back and everything is fixed with the Rito. Everyone is proud of Tulin for how well he did, and he is best boy. I didn't mention that before, but Tulin is like, I love him so fucking much. He is so fucking adorable. He's voiced by Christina Valenzuela, which is just brilliant. And he's so fucking cute. He's so adorable. I love him so much. He is baby. He is baby, and I will protect him. Though he can protect himself. He's a fucking sage. Now, the order I went with the rest of them, since I went to the Rito first because it was pushing me in that direction, the order I went on the rest of them was also the order suggested. When you go down into the bunker at Lookout Landing, you could talk to a guy there who will mention all of the different regions. And on top of that, when you talk to Pura initially, she also brings up the regions in this order. You go to the Rito, then the Gorons, then the Gerudo, then the Zora. And so that's the order I went in. So I went to the Gorons next. And there you find out that the Gorons are basically drugged out of their minds. Because Yunobo has become a drug kingpin. And this is not even a joke. I wish I was joking. It is really fucking weird. Yunobo, the cute, sweet baby boy from Breath of the Wild. Not actually a baby. I'm just calling him a baby. But he's been possessed by a mask that was given to him by a mysterious fake Zelda. And has become a drug kingpin. Mining these drugged out rock roasts that the Gorons eat and become drugged out of their mind. And the only one who has any seemingly sense about him is the former leader of the Gorons, the old guy, Bluto, I believe is his name. But he's trying to snap Yunobo and them out of it. Yunobo's kind of become an asshole because of being taken over by the mask. And so you have to free Yunobo and then help him reach the top of Death Mountain to fight a boss there. I don't remember the boss's name, but you use a flying vehicle that you have to put together to fight it, using Yunobo as a projectile, because that's Yunobo's power. While Tulin launches you further throughout the air, Yunobo acts as a projectile that you can launch to break rocks and hurt enemies and stuff. And in this case, it's literally both. It's an enemy that you hurt, and it's made of rocks. After you do this, though, you can go into the chasm of Death Mountain, which leads you into the depths. And that's where you and Yunobo are able to find the Fire Temple. The Fire Temple is not the best temple. Compared to the Wind Temple, the Fire Temple is more of an actual temple in the depths, and it's the easiest temple to cheese. And what I mean by that is they want you to use the minecart system to travel throughout it and find all the different nodes that you have to hit in order to unlock the main gate to get to the boss and everything. You don't have to do that. I barely use the minecart stuff. You can climb through most of it and cheese your way through most of it, either by climbing and using your paraglider and stuff. You rarely have to use the minecarts, honestly. It's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of sad. And I figured that out just by exploring it. Like, I didn't even, like, have to be told that. That's how easy it is to cheese. But I got through it, and you end up facing this Goma. Goma is a classic Legend of Zelda enemy, and you face another Goma here. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's Marbled Goma in this one. So you face Marbled Goma. Pretty easy to defeat, not a difficult enemy, but a really fun battle nonetheless. And you have another Sage moment. The Sage of Fire contacts Yunobo, once again tells the story of the Demon King and Raru's sacrifice, and tells about how, once again, Zelda came to him. And so he passes his power to Yunobo, who unlocks the Avatar power, and he gives his avatar to you to use as well, so you can smash rocks and attack enemies with it at any time. And if you make a vehicle, it basically automatically attaches itself to the vehicle if you have the avatar activated. So Yunobo becomes the new Sage of Fire, and just like Tulin, pledges himself to you. Through all of this, the drug rock roast stuff is completely destroyed, and everybody is saved from, being high on gloom, basically, the entire time. Like I said, the next one I went to was the Gerudo, and this one's probably my favorite. While the Rito had my favorite character, and obviously the big emotional moment of seeing the Wind Temple, the Gerudo regions one is my favorite, because here you end up seeing that there's a massive storm between Kakariko Bazaar and Gerudo Town. You have to travel through it to get to Gerudo Town, and within it you end up seeing a returning enemy from previous Zelda games that you did not expect to see here, the Gibdo. Except instead of like mummy-like this time, they're these bug-like zombies. And it's really fucking creepy. They're pretty great enemies, though. You have to like use fire or electricity to break off their outer shell before you can actually damage them. It's a really cool mechanic. So after getting through the desert and getting to Gerudo Town, you find it abandoned and have to make your way to an underground, basically shelter that they're staying in. You can't get through the front entrance because you're, a guy. So you have to find a special way to get through it. Once you do, you meet Buliera, the head guard for Chief Riju, and you're eventually led to where Riju is. Riju's power is to summon lightning, kind of like Urbosa's from Breath of the Wild, but it's a more directed shot, because she creates this field around her and then hits whatever you shoot an arrow at, which is kind of a waste of arrows to a degree, but it is still useful nonetheless. So you have to help her practice that, and then you have to help her save Kakariko Bazaar, which is under attack by the Gibdos. You help her and the other soldiers fight the Gibdos and destroy the hives at Kakariko Bazaar, and then you have to go back to Gerudo Town and do the same. You have to have this big battle against the Gibdos at Gerudo Town, which is even bigger scale. You even get to choose where to station all the different types of Gerudo guards. Like, we'll put the Cannoneers at this entrance. We'll put the spear warriors at this entrance. And it's actually really cool to try and figure out exactly which is best to do where. You also get a bunch of supplies, and then you start the big fight. You have to destroy the different hives and stop and then defeat all of the Gibdos. It's so satisfying. Just these parts alone, these two battles for Kakariko Bazaar and Gerudo Town, are extremely satisfying and fun to do. It's probably some of the most satisfying battles in the game. After you do that, though, you have to help find the Lightning Temple by following this puzzle behind Gerudo Town in the desert. You follow the puzzle, unlock the Lightning Temple, Riju joins you, and at this point, you have to enter the temple. But before you can, you're confronted by the boss a lot earlier than you would expect. Queen Gibdo, a giant bug-like creature that is pretty easy to take down in this first battle. But it's just the first battle. Because after you defeat her, she escapes to the top of the temple. And again, this one, like the Fire Temple, is very much a classic just temple. So you and Riju have to go throughout the temple and use electricity and stuff to be able to power everything up. This temple is so fun to navigate. It's a blast to go through. It's just really fucking fun. It's definitely my favorite of the temples, without question. So you go through the temple, you get to the end and you fight Queen Gibdo again. This battle's a lot harder, but still not super difficult or anything. You get through it and you're Gucci. Riju gets her powers from the Sage of Lightning, gives you her avatar, which does the same thing as her as she does, with the directed lightning attacks. And she once again vows to serve you. So after that, I went to the Zora. When you reach Zora's domain, you start to see that it's sludged up. There's a lot of sludge everywhere that it can be destroyed by water, but there's a lot of it everywhere. When you reach the actual domain itself, you meet a new character named Yona, a Zora who had just come to the domain recently, or at least within the years since Breath of the Wild. And she is basically a healer and just someone that the rest of the Zora rely on. And you soon find out that she's actually the fiance of Prince Sidon. And so, a lot of people were joking about, like, oh, they hate her because Sidon, because they loved Sidon. And it's like, don't get me wrong, Sidon is bae, for sure. I adore that fish man. I love that fish man. I want to marry the fish man. But at the same time, Yona is such a nice, just wonderful character. She's perfect for him. She is absolutely perfect for him, and you get to see how much she and Sidon love each other. It's absolutely precious, and I support it wholeheartedly. We could just get in there, maybe form a polyamorous relationship. We can do a throuple situation, right? I like both of them. Throuple with the fish. Fish waifu and fish husbando. Anyway. But yeah. She directs you to Sidon, who is at the top of Ploymus Mountain, which has now become basically a dedicated area to Mipha. Prior to this, Mipha only had a statue within the domain, but that's been moved to Ploymus Mountain, and there's an entire area there for her in tribute now as well, which is really beautiful. But you find Sidon there, and you have to end up working with him to get to the water temple, which is in the sky. So that's pretty fun. You actually have to go into the sky to do it. You have to travel up into the sky through waterfalls and stuff that are falling from sky islands. And once you're in the sky, you also have like some islands that have like some zero gravity effects going on, which is pretty interesting. But you eventually get to the water temple, and I'll be honest, this is the weakest of the temples. It's an outdoor temple in the sky made up of a few different floating islands. And honestly, it's really boring. It's not that interesting to navigate. It's way too easy to get through. And Sidon's ability is really not that great either. Basically, he puts a bubble of water around you that acts as a shield, but if you attack while it's around you, it will also shoot it outward. It's useful in some cases, but it's the least useful of the Sage abilities, for sure. But you get through the temple, again, super easily, and you end up facing the Muktarok, which is a muck-based Octorok. It's made of the same muck and goop that's plaguing Zora's domain. And it's like an Octorok-like creature, but it also can use the muck to turn itself into a shark-like creature. It's super annoying and boring to fight, honestly. It's not a good boss either. Like, this entire section was unfortunately very disappointing. Sidon and Yona are great, but yeah, the actual section with the temple and all are disappointing. After you beat the Muktarok, you have the same thing. Sidon is confronted by the Sage of Water, and she tells him the same stuff that we heard before. She gives him his powers, and he pledges himself to fight alongside you. Same stuff. Afterwards, though, when you go back to the domain, Sidon is basically given the kingdom. King Dorphan chooses to retire, and Sidon becomes the king of Zora's domain, with Yona officially becoming his queen at that point, his wife and his queen. So there's not really a marriage ceremony, it's just once he becomes the king, it's like it's made official. And it's like, this is wholesome. I like this. I just wish the temple was, good. At all. It was, and it really sucks too, especially with how easy it is, because the water temple in previous games is known for being difficult. It's such a waste. It's such a waste. But after you get all 4 of those sages, you go back and talk to Purah and are led to find the 5th sage. Because you find out through the memories and all, there is a 5th sage, and it is King Raru's sister, Minaru. So this one you have to find through this interesting quest where you find some Zonai Runes and go up into the sky, and you have to follow this path to get to this special mask thing that shoots a beam that basically leads you into the depths, where you find a construct factory. Once you're at the construct factory, Minaru leads you to these 4 smaller factories that will build parts of the construct, which then you have to bring to the main factory and put together. Once all of them are put together, Minaru's spirit inhabits the construct. And you have to then go to the spirit temple, also in the depths. Once you get to the spirit temple, you find out that this is the worst of the temples. Yes, even worse than the water temple, because the spirit temple is fucking nothing. You go to the temple, you go in, you fight the boss right away. That is literally it. That's the entire temple. It is so pathetic. It's literally nothing. There is nothing to this temple. The boss battle is against a gloom-affected construct, which is a pretty fun battle. Like, basically it's a giant robot wrestling match. It's pretty fucking fun. But the fact that there's nothing else to this temple is super disappointing. It is really disappointing. But this time, when you go and defeat the boss, Minaru talks to you. She gives you the power, and she pledges herself to you in that way. She is inhabiting the giant robot construct that you can summon at any time, just like you summon the avatars of the other sages. And she acts as the sage of spirit. It is the sage of spirit. She acts as the sage of spirit for you. And so, yeah. So the only sage you don't have now is literally Zelda, the sage of time. But you have all the 5 other sages. And so at this point, you basically are able to go and finish the game. I didn't do that, though. I did some shrine hunting at this point, because I wanted to gather up my hearts, gather up my my stamina a little bit. And there's actually an easy way to do this. If you finish the depths first, which I did, and you get all the light roots in the depths, the light roots there are in the same spot as the shrines on the surface or in the sky. So if you triangulate like where the light roots are and then move to the map of the surface, you can find shrines that way. It's really easy to do. So I did some shrine hunting and got it to where I had 2.5 wheels of stamina and 26 hearts. And at that point, I was ready to go. So when you go into the chasm underneath Hyrule Castle, you basically have to find your way to the sealing room where you were originally. You go throughout the depths. You fight some various enemies, a bunch of different types, and have to navigate your way down. You eventually reach the same path that you and Zelda were traveling at the very beginning of the game, and you can even unblock the murals that were blocked before using bombs and whatnot. This reveals some of the murals that show Ganondorf having won before and Zelda turning into a dragon. Because yes, Zelda turned into a dragon. it's revealed through the memories that to swallow a secret stone, which are the stone, the tear-shaped stones that all of the sages have. Swallowing that turns you into a dragon, an immortal dragon, which makes me wonder if the dragons that were there in Breath of the Wild and are still here in this game were originally like Zonai or something that swallowed secret stones. I kind of want to know more about that now. But Zelda, after Ganondorf is sealed in the past, realizes that there's not really any way at the moment to get back to the present outside of doing this. And plus, it's also a way she figures out to heal the Master Sword. So she swallows the stone and becomes the Dragon of Light. And through this, we see that she has been around during this entire game. You see the Dragon of Light during this game. If you go to the dragon, you can pull the Master Sword out of her, and it's fully healed and better than ever. But Zelda's unfortunately still stuck in the dragon form at that point. So, once you reach the end of the path that you're going down, you get to the room where Ganondorf was originally sealed. You go down from there, and you eventually find him. Before you do, though, all the bosses from before come in, and the sages have to stop them and fight them for you. You continue on, you find Ganondorf, and at this point, the battles begin. And I say battles because there's multiple. The battles against Ganondorf are so fucking good. I mean, before you do anything, he fully revives himself from being a mummy and everything. And the battles are great. You basically have a few stages. You fight him in his normal form first, which isn't too difficult once you realize his pattern. The only problem is Gloom, obviously cutting down on your maximum hearts, and the fact that he can also dodge you. Like, you know how you do a perfect dodge that leads to a flurry rush? He can do that. Except he just doesn't do the flurry rush part. But he can do a perfect dodge. That's wild. He doesn't do it much at all in his first stage, but then he goes into his second stage where he enters his Demon King form with the long flowing red hair and everything. In this stage, he also summons multiple Phantom Ganons that the sages will come in and help fight while you're fighting the main Ganondorf. The Phantom Ganons will attack you as well, and the sages will also go after Ganondorf if they can as well, too. While you're fighting Ganondorf, though, he will dodge you a lot during this section. He will do just a perfect dodge, and he also does a lot more vicious attacks, which are harder to dodge, especially with the Phantom Ganons around. Before those are defeated, it's like, yeah, it's a lot to deal with. But once you defeat him there, he basically gets pissy and decides, you know what? You are not good enough to defeat me. I'm the Demon King. I deserve the world for some reason. I'm going to swallow my secret stone. Because he has a secret stone as well. That he basically stole from Zelda. So, he swallows his secret stone. And becomes a dragon. He becomes the Demon Dragon, a dark counterpart to the Light Dragon. And speaking of, Zelda, the Light Dragon, appears at this time and helps you fight him. She doesn't do too much of the fighting herself. She blocks some of his attacks when he's breathing gloom at you, because he breathes gloom instead of fire. Though I don't think any of these dragons actually breathe fire. But you have to basically fight him in dragon form now as the third stage of this battle. This stage is fairly easy. You basically have to get onto his back and get to these little growths, destroy the growths, and then after you do, you jump onto his head and stab the secret stone. It defeats him for good. He explodes in one fucking hell of an explosion. It's really fucking badass. And Ganondorf is defeated. It's a pretty wild battle. And I like how, like, in previous games, Ganondorf becomes Ganon at the end, the giant pig monster and all. In this one, he becomes a fucking dragon. It's like, okay, that's a different step. um, but you defeat him, and the day is saved. At this point, though, Zelda is still a dragon. So the spirits of Rauru and his wife, Queen Sonia, who you meet through the Dragon's Tear memories, they come together and use basically the last of their remaining power, giving up their spirit forms as well, channeling it all of their power through Link to heal Zelda. This allows her to return to her human form, and at this point, one of the best scenes in the game happens. Zelda in her human form is falling through the sky. The music hits. It is epic, and you have to dive. You have to dive just like in the beginning of the game when she fell and disappeared. You as Link have to dive and save her. At the beginning of the game, you couldn't reach her. You reach out your hand to try and grab her, but you fail. So at this point, you reach out and right when you grab her and like grab a hold of her hand, like I cried. I was crying. I'm crying thinking about it now. Well, I'm tearing up at least. Because it's such a great full circle moment for the game. Link couldn't grab her at the beginning. There's a part in the Temple of Time during the tutorial part where you get the power, the time power from her spirit, and it's just like a spiritual like form of her. It's like she's not even really there, but he grabs her hand, and before he does, he actually looks like he gives this look like I couldn't grab her hand before. He looks like really like unnerved by that. And when he grabs her hand, he gets the powers there. And now, at the end, he gets to grab her hand and save her. He grabs her hand as she's falling, and they fall into the water together, and he saves her life, stepping out with her and bringing her back to Hyrule in the present day. The game ends, and you get an after-credits scene with the sages pledging to continue to protect and serve Hyrule, while Minoru finally passes on to join her brother and Sonia in the afterlife. Purah is also there because Purah, I guess, wanted to see the Sky Islands as well, which fair enough. But it's a great way to close things out, and it's just, yeah, it's perfection. The game has so many great things going for it. It's got so many amazing moments, so many amazing mechanics and battles and bosses and temples. It basically takes Breath of the Wild, which was already phenomenal, adds stuff in from previous entries of the series, as well as some new stuff, and makes it like 10 times better than Breath of the Wild. It's so drastically better. And Breath of the Wild was phenomenal, so that's saying something. It improves on so many things. There's so many quality of life improvements, and I haven't even touched on stuff like the fact that you can build your own house. Instead of just getting a house that you improve upon, like in Breath of the Wild, you actually get to build this one and its layout from scratch. You're limited to the place you can build it and the amount of space you have and how many rooms you can use. But you do get to build it from scratch, and there's a lot of different ways you can do so. So, yeah, it's pretty fun in that regard. And it's just a great aspect of the game. And there's a lot of other stuff to talk about, and I'll get to maybe some other stuff here. Like, let's talk about some of the enemies. Like, there's a bunch of new enemy types in here, like Hyruleans, who are just awesome enemies. But you get like boss bokoblins who lead the other bokoblins and stuff. You get obviously the soldier constructs and whatnot. There's just so many good ones, but obviously the Gleeoks are the best new enemy. These giant three-headed dragons that are very difficult to defeat. You thought Lynels were hard to defeat in Breath of the Wild? Gleeoks are much harder to defeat. And I defeated a fire one, a lightning one, and an ice one, as well as a King Gleeok, which is one head of all three. So I defeated all the different types of Gleeoks. One of each, mind you, but still. It was an absolute blast to do. I had just the most fun time. And there's so much more. There's just so much more I could talk about, but this video's long enough as it is. So, without question, I would say that Tears of the Kingdom is my new favorite game. Not just new favorite Zelda game, but as of the current moment, my favorite game, period. It's just that damn good. The story is so damn good. It made me cry on so many occasions. The characters are so damn good. Both old and new ones really shine in this. From Sidon to Tulin to Yona to Ganondorf himself. This is 100% the best Ganondorf. It's not even close. Matt Mercer helps with that a lot, but also the writing. And the fact that this is the scariest Ganondorf, too. Like, he's actually fucking terrifying. There is a meme face that was put in one of the tiers, where he just makes this really ridiculous face while laughing. It's silly, it's been memed to hell, but, like, it doesn't take away from his threatening presence at all. It's just so good. It's just so actively good as a game. I really have no huge complaints about it. The only stuff I mentioned already, the time reverse mechanic isn't really super useful. For the most part, there are some examples where you can use it in the overworld, like, oh, you'll see a piece of ruins fall. You can ride that up into the sky. That's kind of useful, but for the most part, I barely used it. It's just not really needed. There's also just the aspect of the water temple and everything with that was just not good, and the spirit temple wasn't even really a temple, so those were not great either. But most of it was really good, and there's a lot of fun armor sets you can get in it. Like, you can get nostalgic sets. Like, I beat the game wearing the set of the Sky, which is the Skyward Sword costume. So I beat the game with that, but I also had the Phantom armor from Spirit Tracks, Zelda's armor from that. Because in Spirit Tracks, Zelda's actually a companion who goes along with you, because her spirit was ripped from her body and ended up getting placed in it wasn't placed in there. She put herself into Phantom armor. So yeah, that's pretty fun. You can get that in the game. The Zonite set is one of the better ones. It's also very very tribal looking, I guess you could say. And there's various other sets throughout the game. I got one piece of the feast. One piece of the Fierce Deity set. Completely on accident, too. I just came across it when I was, shrine hunting at the end. I found a cave, and it's I see the thing where you find the armor, the chest, surrounded by the little shrine thing. Not like a shrine, where you get the orbs to upgrade yourself, but like a shrine. You know what I mean. I hope you know what I mean. But there you find the chest, and I just found it. It's okay, whatever. I wasn't really going for it, but okay. Yeah, there's just so much in this. Again, I could talk for a lot longer, but I'm not going to. This is already an hour and a half long as it is. I apologize for that, but hopefully the fact that things are separated out into chapters on the progress bar will help you out with that, so you can check out different things. And obviously you can pause it and everything at any time and do it as you will, but this is the end of the video, so you'll have already known that. But yeah, definitely my new favorite game of all time. There's just so much to it. And again, as a lifelong Zelda fan, it was just that much more epic, that bigger of a scale for me. it had a lot to live up to after Breath of the Wild, and it exceeded Breath of the Wild in every way. It was just so damn good. It was so satisfying. And I hope that if you've been playing it, you've enjoyed it as well. I know I took like, I think it's been like 6 weeks since it released. I know I took it longer than some people to defeat the main storyline, but I was just really, I was just vibing and playing it a lot of the case. It took me a while to even get to a lot of the main stuff at all. I was just doing a lot of the side stuff and traveling around. Getting the Great Fairies was a time-consuming process, for example. But yeah, it was a great game. I would 100% recommend it to everyone. And they've said that they're going to keep the open world format, but I assume the next main series game is not going to be in this same part of the timeline. I assume that it's going to take place in a different incarnation, which is fine because we've had 3 games in this incarnation now. We've had Breath of the Wild, we had Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which is technically a main series game. It just branches the timeline again a little bit because of the changes it makes. But then you have Tears of the Kingdom as well. So 3 games within this part of the continuity. And honestly, I think that's enough. I don't think we need any more. We don't need another Hyrule Warriors. We don't need, in this continuity. We should move on to the next incarnation, the next part of the timeline. And whether that takes place earlier in the timeline or after Tears of the Kingdom doesn't matter. That's all good either way. But I'm excited to find out. Also, just one last thing before we quit. Some people are confused, I feel, about what it's saying about the creation of Hyrule in this game. Because Rauru and Sonia mentioned being the first king and queen of Hyrule who founded it. And a lot of people think that means it takes place, like, after Skyward Sword. And it's like, no. Like, the stuff in the past. The stuff with Rauru and Sonia and all that and Ganondorf originally takes place after Skyward Sword. And it's like, no. That very clearly is not the case. I believe that the stuff in the past with Rauru and Sonia and the founding of Hyrule is the founding of this Hyrule. Because remember, Hyrule has actually been destroyed, like, I think a couple times. It was flooded at one point, and a new Hyrule had to be founded and everything. So this is not the same Hyrule as before. I believe that the stuff in the past took place after the timeline reconvergence. I believe that when the timelines reconverged, basically history kind of was like, not really reset, but kind of just like started anew. It started basically its own new thing. And so at that point, the Zonai came into existence. Rauru and Sonia founded Hyrule. And that's what led into the past, into the previous. But all of that with the past in this game, I still believe took place after every other game except Breath of the Wild. It was very clearly before Breath of the Wild, way before. Way, but still after the timeline split reconverged. That's based on just what I feel this is kind of going for, and I don't feel like it would make a lot of sense otherwise. But maybe it'll be confirmed one way or the other. I don't know. We'll see in the future. And whenever we get DLC, I'll obviously be playing the DLC. I don't expect that till next year, though. We're getting Pokemon DLC this year. I don't expect Legend of Zelda until next year. They're going to wait at least a year after the game's released to do that because of how big of a game this is. They're going to wait a while. So, yeah. That was my experience and everything and all my thoughts on Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. This is a pretty comprehensive review. I hope you enjoyed. Tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. For now, though, I'm Connie and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.